Welcome, everybody, to another session of Abby's Book Club, the specific podcast is Impressions, where we read a book and give you our first impressions of it. We have a star studded lineup of guests today. I'm personally excited. I know everybody here is excited. We have a tradition on this book club. We all put our books to the screen to show that none of us
Damn.
have bootlegged the book. So if you don't have the book, or whoever doesn't hold up the book, you kind of know where they got it. Right?
That's so rude, bro, because you are the one who gave me the audiobook, bro. That's so rude.
We got them.
You
we
are
got
where
them.
I got it. I'm not taking that. I'm not taking that.
We got them.
You
we
are
got
where
them.
I got the audiobook.
Man, exciting book. We are reading George Orwell's Animal Farm. Where to start? Who has any initial opinions?
I'm gonna
Who
start
wants
with
to
the
say something?
cheers for our traditions.
Okay. Moving on to our second tradition. We all have a nice bottle of wine. These are friendly chats, conversational chats. Cheers. Kat, I saw you didn't look at me in the eye, but it's all right.
I did. I was looking. It's just the thing. The background blur. You didn't see. Zoom's got me. Zoom did you dirty. I'm sorry.
I think at this point, Kat, you can switch to speaker view and we can get right into the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Does anyone have any initial thoughts? Does anyone want to say anything?
Initial thoughts. This book is way too deep to have been the book that we were forced to read in grade 8. Like, I don't understand why we were reading this in high school.
Wait a
in
minute.
Grade 8.
Y'all read this book?
Yeah, bro. Like,
Yeah.
Didn't you guys also read it too? Like,
Am
I
I
don't
just
know
not
who taught you
remembering?
guys English.
Watson.
did.
No, bro,
Watson
because
taught us English.
I was with Mrs. I think Mrs. Fenter. Yeah, at the time, Miss Gwilym now.
I think
And
Watson.
at the time,
Watson
she was
taught us English.
yeah, in grade 8 and 9 as well.
The GOAT.
Oof, I don't
The
remember.
goat.
She
You
is
see,
the
I don't
goat.
remember.
Shout out the goat. But yeah,
Okay.
Miss Gwilym was the one we read the book with, and she took us through Animal Farm. And I remember, like, she had such a passion for it that I understand now retrospectively because the book is incredible. But back then, like, yo, bruh, to get me to pay attention for anything longer than 5 seconds is a lot to ask, bro.
Nah,
so
same boat.
Let me ask you, Miles. Why do you immediately jump to saying the book is incredible? Where do those thoughts stem from?
because I think it's not an easy thing to be able to convey one of life's most potent and like relatable realities through a story that makes it so easy to follow. Because it sounds like a children's story with the way that it's written. The words are very simple. It's very easy to listen to if you listen to an audiobook or read if you're reading the book. But the lessons behind what you're seeing, like there were so many points in time where I was listening to the book and thinking to myself, this is exactly what's happening in society in so many ways. So I think a book that can convey like very deep pictures of what's going on right now without having to use like verbosity to communicate its depth is a very well written book. It
Yeah.
sounds like a children's story, but it's
You know
not.
what? Yeah, I'll attest to that, Miles, in saying that, Kat, this is actually one of those books that you can give to anyone, and I'd be hard pressed if you don't understand it. But I think equally, if you do the history behind the book, I think you uncover more and more and more layers of insights that I don't think that every person that reads this book is ever going to get to that level of depth of what's actually going on. So powerful, transcendent book, and I think it will always be relevant. It's timeless. Brilliant book. Did you guys know that George Orwell is not his actual name? Who knew that?
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
know
remember
that.
she told us
Research.
this in high school.
I
I
had
did
no
know
idea.
this, yeah.
His real name is Eric Arthur Blair.
His middle
And
name is
George
Author.
Orwell- Arthur. Excuse me,
Hey,
Arthur.
yo.
His real name is Eric Arthur Blair. He was born on June 25th in 1903. So he's born more than a century ago. That's crazy. More than 100 years ago. And you'll see, we're going to talk about this book as if it can be applied today. So that speaks to his timeless nature. He was born to British parents. He's a British gent. But he was born in India and he served in the Indian Imperial Police Force. And he also fought in the Spanish Civil War. So he's been part of a civil war. Maybe that will give you a little more insight into why he was definitely equipped or the perfect person to write a book like this. Excuse me. I just need to put my phone on silent. And he was
You need
also
to bring your camera
a
back too,
world. Okay.
because you got a call probably on a device that's also using the same camera you're using.
Yeah, apologies about that. I'll just say this for the people that are listening. He was a World War correspondent for the BBC. So he was reporting on the war. With that being said, please take the conversation forward as I sort out my camera issues.
Yeah, that's interesting. The first time, so obviously for the people back home, we tried to record this last week. You know, we're always genuine on these podcasts, which is what I like. So we tried to record this last week, and it didn't quite go so well. But we did have some comments that we shared that I thought was interesting on its writing, and I shared that I found that it was like very, I think objective was the word I used, right? Like it wasn't kind of painting a bad picture of not Snowball, but what's his face? I'm even forgetting the
Napoleon.
characters. Napoleon, right? It kind
Napoleon.
of like that. No one. Well, I guess Masego, you said you can give this to anyone and have them understand it because you kind of know. Okay, this guy's lying. You know, you kind of in your head are like, okay, this guy's just plain. He's just pushing weird agendas now. But the way the story is written, it's not written such that he's not going, you see, he's lying. This is what liars do. Ooh, look, because obviously it's a story. And I enjoyed that because it's kind of like up to the reader to kind of discern what tactics Napoleon's using to kind of, divert this enlarged community that he's created. Because there's a lot of people, most are smart, so yeah. But I always say it started with the milk, man. I say it started with the milk. My bad. Nah, I'm diverting.
No, but I agree with you, man, because there were times when I think the objectivity with which it was spoken actually had me thinking, damn, Snowball really did do that to the damn.
You're right,
to the
right?
female.
Wait, it made me have to go back. Like, wait, he didn't do that.
I was like, wait, did I miss when Snowball could do that to these people?
Exactly.
Because then people start confessing, and all of a sudden there's people are committing suicide on Snowball's behalf. I'm like, wait, what?
Like,
So
Did he actually do it?
even the rules.
they were genuinely part of. I was like, no,
Listen,
wait, no.
hold up. Before we get into individual characters, actually, what I like to do is for the listener considering to try get this book, I like to give just a quick summary about what the book is about, and then I
Yeah.
think we can go into, which character.
Yeah, that's cooking, bro. You let us off the chain, dog.
So
Okay,
I mean,
go for it.
the book is titled Animal Farm, and it's about a group of animals on a farm owned by a farmer and his wife. So it's a family farm, and they decide to revolt against the owners of that farm, the human owners of that farm. And after kicking the human family off of the farm, they then have to still carry out activities in order to sustain themselves, right? They still have to live their lives and make sure the farm is functional because that's how they all survive. So there's a lot of things that happen in between, right? So there's smarter animals and dumber animals. The pigs are regarded as the smartest animals of the pack. They are hardworking animals. They are apparently slay queen animals as well in the book. And the whole drama is just them, not to spoil too much of the book for anyone who's trying to read it, the whole drama is them kind of claiming their freedom. So they think. Then things happen in between. There's a lot of corruption that takes place, and at the end, they realize that the people who then become newly in power are not any better than the people who were in power before. I think that speaks to hierarchy, and we'll definitely get into that. But let me just give you a brief rundown of some of the characters. So you have like 4 pigs, and 2 of the pigs are kind of competing for power after they kick the humans off the farm. That's who Miles and Katlego was talking about Napoleon and Snowball. Quick question before we continue. Who knows what real events this book is based on? I'm always throwing trivia questions. Yeah.
Well, we have
The
we have
Russian.
answers already this time. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
I explained
I
to the
think people.
viewers that we tried to record this last week and we talked about a few things. You know, we're always honest with our viewers, right? Like even when we have recordings that don't record, we tell them, "Oh, we spoke about this."
What went on? 100%. I think
So
Wasn't
Fifi was
there for
trying
the
to jump
previous
at the
recordings. I
question.
actually didn't know this. I need this
No,
trivia
because
also
I
because
actually
I
did my
wasn't there for the
research this
previous.
time.
Okay.
go for it,
Okay.
Fifi.
Shoot.
So this is to represent the Russian Revolution. It has a specific name because I believe they have quite a few. And one of the characters is meant to then signify Stalin and then his opposing party. I don't remember his name, but it's meant to then represent kind of those
It's your
events.
face beaming for me, knowing that you know the answer this time. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly that. This is an allegorical book, and I think that's what leads to some of its timelessness and the timeless themes within the book. It is about the Russian Revolution, and the animals are all anthropomorphized, right? Anthropomorphication is a literary technique that's used when you give non-human things human-like characters. So you find that a lot in old type literature. So the Bible is a big anthropomorphic play as well on celestial bodies for those who like to go to that level of research. And also, um, if you think about the zodiac and spirituality, New Age spirituality, so all the zodiac signs, Scorpio and Aquarius, and what there's quite a lot of anthropomorphication that happens there. So the animals are anthropomorphized. We have I mean, the story begins with Old Major, which is an old wise boar, a pig, right? Pigs are generally the smartest animals in the story. And also, funny enough, pigs are also one of the smartest animals. So I think that was a cool little link that the author did
To be
there.
sorry to interrupt you, but I've noticed that like just generally off of like an impression, or I don't know, maybe this is also things I learned in school because I don't know where I got my impression of animals to be like this, but they were very accurate in the way that they chose to describe each of the characters in terms of like what you expect them to do, how you expect them to behave in particular places. Sheep were literally being sheep. The horses were being workers. The
Yeah.
the dogs were being loyal to those who groomed them. Pigs were being the greedy ones. So it was very well written according to what your I guess more layman impression of what different animals are supposed to represent in your mind. So I
Yeah.
really like it was a really good book. But anyway, continue. Sorry, it's just a side note.
No, Miles, that's a very good point because I think, in effect, what that does is it makes you realize that certain traits are archetypal. So they archetypes, they exist and they repeat, right? You've heard the saying before that history often repeats itself, but also human nature can be kind of boxed into what we call archetypes, right? An example of an archetype would be a hero figure, and the hero's archetype is a very important archetype in all of story and all of storytelling, right? In fact, when you study film, they teach you about the hero archetype. And it was Joseph Campbell, I believe, who theorized about the hero's journey, that there's certain things that happen to everyone if you can use language to compartmentalize it well. So the hero will get a for example, the hero will start established in its ordinary world, right? The hero is part of a world that exists normal according to whatever they are, right? So it could be a fairy in a fairy world, it could be a toy in a toy world, it doesn't matter. And then they get a call to action, right? So something calls them on a journey, and usually there's a refusal of that call to action because the hero typically at that point is not manifest as the full hero. So it does not believe that it can solve the challenge of which it's being called. So typically in a hero movie, somebody has to save the world. Somebody is told that they are the chosen one, like Neo in the Matrix. They typically reject it because they don't know themselves as the hero. Along the way, they eventually accept the call. They meet mentors along the way who are people who are more advanced than them, who are going to teach them more about their journey and more about themselves. They have adversaries. There's the Dark Knight situation, or the cave of Brahma in religion, or the Dark Night of the soul in spirituality, where the hero is in despair and feels like there's no hope, and then eventually the hero triumphs over the villain. That's an archetypal story that you will find in any good script. In fact, that's the basis of drama. So I would then argue that those archetypes are informed by natural laws and biological realities, which is a big foundation to then begin to start to understand the themes and the conflicts that arise in this book. To speak more about the structure of the book, um, like we said, it starts with this animal's dream, the boar, right? Old Major.
Martin had a dream.
And
Sorry.
who knows who Old Major represents in the book in real life?
You can't convince me it's not Martin Luther King. I know
Hitler?
it's not, but you can't convince me it's not, bro.
No, Hitler.
I felt like you were searching for answers.
I'm checking on Google right now.
See,
It's okay.
See, these people are cheating. These people are cheating. Hitler.
Yeah, they got Google.
What's the answer? What's the answer?
I'm gonna hit you. The answer is a figure called Karl Marx.
Ooh,
Like,
that's
The
interesting.
founder of
The
Marxism.
Marxism, Karl
That's
Marx.
very
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
The philosopher that's behind Marxism. In fact, and this is why I said, yeah, the book initially seems simple, but for the researcher, it just goes layers and layers deeper. So the Old Major, which is Karl Marx, sometimes they say it's a mixture between Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, but Karl Marx being the bigger representation here. It starts with him, and his dream is actually, if you read the speech, he has a speech that he tells all the animals before he dies, right? If you read that speech,
The
it's
boar.
an interpolation of the Communist Manifesto, which is a academic document. I guess you could call it academic, but philosophical document that was authored by Karl Marx and Engels. I forgot Engels' name. And that Communist Manifesto is the foundational doctrine for then Marxism, for then socialism, and even communism, because it is
Makes
the
sense,
Communist Manifesto.
Mm.
So Karl Marx was really the thinker that brought forward a lot of ideas to give birth to this economic philosophy that has impacted our world, although I would argue not in a positive way. Other people feel differently. So that's Old Major. His speech in the beginning is the Communist Manifesto. And how can we tell? How can we tell that it's a representation of the Communist Manifesto? Well, the Communist Manifesto does a couple of things. And one of the things that it does is it summarizes history as a class struggle, right? So it says all of history can be defined or viewed from the perspective of a class struggle. The two classes that are put forward in the Communist Manifesto are the proletariats, which are the poor people, the servant class, the working class, really, that's the better way to say it,
And
the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, the
right?
bourgeoisie.
The bourgeoisie is the ownership class. Today we'd call them the capitalist class. In fact, that's the root word for the, today we say bad and bougie. The bougie comes from the idea of bourgeoisie, the idea that you are rich or you own the factors of production. So Marx immediately says all of history can be seen as a struggle between these two forces. What do you guys think about that? Before we take it further.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing to say, because one of your opening statements when we talked about the book is that the book in itself is timeless. For it to be timeless, there needs to be a certain level of truth to the idea that there is a consistent struggle between bourgeoisie and what's the other class you said?
Proletariat.
Working class.
Sorry?
The
Working
proletariat.
class, yes, but proletarians, thank you. So I think there's a lot of truth in it, man. And I think it's very cyclical in its nature, because one of the, I know, just like from long-term research that I remember doing on Marxism, one of the things that he used to propagate was the idea that in a capitalist society, there will almost always come a point in time in which a communist revolution will arise as a result of the discrepancies in the ways that those two live. And if you look at how many times that has consistently happened, it's giving Thomas, bro. So
I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts
For
because
me-
I want to touch on that.
I want to go back to what you said about handing this book to anybody and then having them read it and then letting them understand it. I'm fine with that, but then we have the journey of the perspective on it, right?
Yeah.
Because just like the lengthy conversation, I believe we saw in Plato, where they were talking
Plato's
about
Republic. Yeah.
Plato's Republic, right? Plato's Republic, sorry. Where we were talking about justice. The perspective of the, I guess, win-win situation kind of differs from person to person and continues to be that. So for me, I believe I agree that there's a contention between the two classes. I don't believe we should classify the classes as such because you see a lot of gray. So, but again, I don't think we should give any of our books that we read to anybody and just let them slide because there's a certain perspective to be gained from it where, I mean, if you're wrong, you're wrong, right? Like, I mean, at least in all of our conversations, we're able to get to the basis where it's like, okay, maybe I may have had a misguided view on this point, and we're able to justify it in the conversation, in the perspective. So, yeah, I just want to go back to that and say I don't think I would give this book to anybody. I agree that there's this seeming contention, but it's not real, and that there's a gray area that's not discussed enough. Nor can I because I'm like very stupid. Next.
Can I?
I wanna. Well, go ahead, Mute. It's okay.
Okay, thanks, Lizzie.
What happened to
maybe
ladies
let me
first,
start by-
Mute?
Musa,
Hey,
come on.
Kat. Mute, please go on.
No,
Ignore
I can't. No, I
them.
can't. Please go ahead. No, I can't.
I just wanted to touch on what Kat said. I don't agree with you regarding how you wouldn't give it to someone else because I believe the book details how we need to be informed. We need to be knowledgeable. We need to know how to read, how to write, because the main reasons why the pigs maintain their power and maintain their manipulation is because most of the other animals were not able to read or write. They could easily change the commandments within a flash, and then the animals just accepted what they saw. I mean, they had 7 commandments, if I remember correctly, and then Jiggy Jiggy, they only had 1, and everyone just took it as it is. So this book shows the importance of being well informed and not to blindly follow anyone. I mean, let's look at what happened to Boxer. A very strong horse, right? So a very
Get
strong
emotional
horse.
if you start talking about what happened to Boxer, bro.
The homie
Bro.
boxer.
Dude, Boxer's so
homie
dirty, man. Yo,
What they did to
like,
him.
like, bro, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was on my way to work when I was listening to the book, and then I was like, "Oh, they're taking him to the hospital." And then what's his name? The donkey man. What's the donkey's name again?
Benjamin.
Benjamin reads out the horse slaughterer thing. I started crying, bro. Like a little tear. Because I was just like, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill the realest nigga in the game, dog.
Imagine, like someone who was so loyal to animalism and Napoleon, and then they just took him out because he was too old to work. So imagine if Boxer was aware of what was really happening. He was gonna knock them out. Like he was gonna revolt against all of them, and I'm sure all of the other animals were going to follow suit. So again, it's very important to be informed. It's very important to read. Don't blindly follow anyone. Like, yeah, that's my takeaway.
Agreed. Just the infamous question. I don't know if you know the infamous question of the club or of the
Can
podcast.
you give this book to anyone?
To anyone. Can you give this book to anyone and expect them to come back like us and go, oh, yeah, oh, I understand. I get it, you know? No, and I
It
feel
is
like
an infamous question.
I feel like no, they're not gonna get it. Like, because even I still don't get it. We're having conversations about who these people represent. I was in the dark about that. Obviously, because I come here intentionally not doing my research to represent the people. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not saying the people notoriously don't do their research, but they don't. So, so anyway, I'm just saying, you know, like, look at the in-depth conversation we're having.
You have to prep the person that you're giving it to, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
you kind of have to.
You
Also,
can't just
even
give it to them.
even after they come back, like, let's talk about the book, and then, you know, let's have I guess a unified understanding of some sort. You know, it doesn't even have to be such, but just a conversation about your reflection on it. Because one person may say, "Hey, what did that guy do? Hey, that Napoleon motherfucker is a genius. What? You know?" and then another person may be like, "What? Is that really what you think?" And you gave him that book, Lizzie. You gave him that book, and now he's like,
But he is a
Napoleon.
genius, eh?
Napoleon's. Oh
But
my
that's
god!
the thing. I was
He is
thinking
a
the same
genius,
thing.
eh?
Like,
You see?
I wasn't even gonna fight that. Like, he is a genius. Like, it's not even. And that's the thing. Genius is an
I
objective
disagree,
term.
and I
See?
think that's
No.
the point.
I'd say
see?
genius is
See?
an objective term. Like, I'm not saying he's a genius in the sense that he used it for good, but like, bro, this
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
understood every animal's weakness, every animal's like ability to perceive depth, and was able to manipulate that such that he could capitalize off of everyone. He understood Squealer's speaking ability and made him a spokesperson, knowing that that guy could convince you that the reason that this thing said horse slaughterer was because the vet didn't change the name. Guys, and you're gonna tell me that nigga's not a genius, bro? Nah, bro.
He is a genius. He is a genius because he's based off Joseph Stalin, which was like.
Okay, guys, Mute
Joseph
wanted to say
Stalin was-
something real quick before you
Okay.
push,
Yeah.
Masego.
Go for it. Go for it. Mute.
Appreciate it, Kat. Let me ask Karl Marx. I just opened up my browser here, and I can't find the answer. To the question I'm looking for.
At least you're honest.
But was he around to experience? And this is an important point that I think needs to be made. Is maybe he came up with all these philosophies and all these theories about how the world should work, right? And how we haven't been functioning previously in our best interests, right? So he came up with this theory on how the world should work, how we should function together and operate leadership structures, etc. Was he around to actually experience the implementation of his theory?
When did he die? Can you search up the date of when he died?
Because I mean, it also speaks to the old major not being around to see the effects
Oh yeah, I
of.
think then most likely he wasn't. I have a feeling he wasn't. And his ideas still live till today. And in fact, people are still championing those ideas as we speak. In fact, there's a war
Karl
right
Marx,
now. Let me just
Sorry,
say
Karl
there's
Marx.
a war. Okay.
Karl Marx was born in 1818 and died in 1883.
So he was not around for the Russian
I'm not gonna
Revolution.
pretend. Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend like I know enough about history to say what he did and didn't see, bro. It wasn't a subject that took in school.
He was not
so I don't
around.
know much, bro.
He was not around for the
Okay.
Russian Revolution. And I was saying that there's a war of ideas today in terms of, this is why it's important to actually study this stuff, because it's playing out today in South Africa, right? There's two opposing views about where South Africa should go, right? And these powerful advocates' voices on either side. There's the DA, and yeah, actually there's the DA, who believes that we should be taking a more capitalistic approach towards building our nation moving forward. And then there's the ANC, the EFF, and the MK party, and a couple of other parties, smaller parties. But when we're talking about the bigger parties, they are on the other side that feel like we should be striving for a more socialist society. And socialism is Marxism, for those who are wondering. So Karl Marx and his ideas, Marxism is socialism. And then the optimal form of socialism, the goal of socialism, as stated by Karl Marx, is communism, right? So it's important to know that. That's also a big point of contention in the American election right now, where the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Congress, um, is seeming like it's implementing more socialist agenda and socialist policy. And it seems like Donald Trump and the Republican Party is more on the capitalist side. Now, those are just words that I've thrown at you. And what I would love for us to do in our conversations is actually break down what the hell that all actually means. You guys all gave a brilliant answer on what you think about Karl Marx's initial idea that history can be summarized as a class struggle between the ownership class and the working class. And I want to respond individually to some of your thoughts around that. I see we have 7 minutes left in the podcast, so in this section of the podcast. So I'm gonna go on a little bit of a rant, and then maybe we'll come back, right? First, on what Miles said. Miles, you said that, you know what, the reason why this book is timeless is because it kind of makes sense. And a lot of history can be seen through the lens of a class struggle between the ownership class and the working class. And then, Katlego, you came in to say that, yeah, sure, you can do that, but you're scared to adopt that statement and that idea. And I got excited when you said that. And you said, because you feel like it's more gray. So I want to double click on that grayness that you're talking about. Um, I, Liz, you more or less commented on the fact that you think this book should be given to everyone because they are important lessons about being literate and being able to access information and think for yourself. Um, and I think, Mute, you just asked if Karl Marx was around to see how his ideas have affected the world. So I think I'll try to address all of that because I have something to say with all of that. First of all, to reduce society into, or history into a struggle between owners and workers is reductionist. And it does not give you, at least not to Karl Marx's intention, the, a good picture of what human struggle was all about. It was not about this battle of classes, you know. In fact, hierarchies in the same sense as you might feel like they created inequality and oppression for people at the bottom of a hierarchy, it also created order and progress, and people prefer hierarchies. So Karl Marx, it, and this is the problem with him, and this is the problem with socialism, and this is the problem with Marxism and communism. Karl Marx perverts a truth, right? The truth that there is a difference between a person on top of a hierarchy and a person at the bottom of a hierarchy. There's a gap, clearly, right? But he perverts it to say that that structure has always been evil, to kind of push a an idea that's more appealing to, I guess, people that feel disempowered, or really, I should say, less educated people, right? People that don't understand how the world actually works, that don't have a scientific view of life and more of a religious view. It appeals to them because they feel that innately, somehow, human beings are all created equal, right? Right? We have that feeling innately in us that everybody's kind of equal, and I don't know how far that idea of yours extends. Maybe you believe that it's just certain conditions that manifest certain abilities in one person versus another, and that's not how reality actually works, right? It's not. There are certain people who are born stronger than others through selective breeding, right? You choose a partner. Women, for example, like saying, I would like a partner that's taller than me. That's selective breeding. The kid is gonna have genetic information about what height to be born. And the bigger you are, right, taller you are, most likely the odds are you'll be stronger than the smaller, shorter person. The odds are is the shorter, smaller person has to use more intellect to survive, where you can use more brute force. And there are economic structures where brute force is more valuable than intellect, and there are economic structures where intellect is more valuable than brute force. But it takes a deep investigation into history um, in order to understand how those nuances manifest. So the first idea you really have to divorce is the fact that we are born equal. It's a nice idea, it's a noble idea, but it's not a true idea. We are not born equal, and some people are better fit in certain situations than others through a genetic lottery, right? That's just what happens. We have Okay, so I mean we have 3 minutes left, but we can go further into it because we're not all born equal. Um, I was really speaking on the point of these hierarchies. We we appreciated when certain people could fill certain roles. So we appreciated. Let's just talk about the difference between men and women. The women were not complaining about patriarchy back when we were nomadic tribes. Yes, there was advantages and disadvantages of a patriarchal society, but the women generally did not want to go out and hunt. That was not their ambition to go fight with the lions and tigers of animals to get food. They organized themselves in that society because it was beneficial initially. Yes, there were tyrannical men, right? Yes, there were men who exerted their power over women unfairly and unjustly, and they didn't know how to control their power. And there were men who um, possessively took ownership of women's bodies, i.e., rape.
Oh, Jesus.
And all
Jesus, that was
going
PC as fuck.
I tried. I tried.
Jesus Christ. Yo, but so I
tried.
respect you. You're on mute, Miles. You're on mute, Miles. You're on mute, Miles. You're on mute. You're on mute, Miles.
You're mute- you're
Miles,
muted,
you're
Miles.
muted. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm saying everything you were saying, bro, was fine until you did this, dog. Why did you do this? That messed up the whole thing,
That
bro.
was PC as hell.
Like,
oh,
that was so
rape.
crazy, bro.
Like, Jesus, dude.
I'm like, oh, like, what are you doing? And the thing is, I saw the conversation getting more and more dangerous, and then he does this, and I'm like, oh my god. Or cancel. This nigga just canceled all of us.
Yeah,
We're
and,
doing
and
this.
YouTube might even flag that word. I was trying to avoid it, but okay.
You can
we
say
have 30
great.
And this
seconds.
was your mechanism of
We have listed
Oh,
them.
my
Let's
word.
try, dog. I thought this was
Grape.
effective.
That was
I
so
thought
Let's
this
just
worked.
restart. Let's just that and with
That's how we
that
do
we're
our
taking
Instagram.
intermission.
Listen.
That's
Wow,
the intermission
PC.
time.
Yeah, that's the point where we should.
Yeah,
On
that's
that,
the
on
intermission,
that,
nigga.
huh?
Yeah.
We'll be right back. We come back, our channel
After
is
these
banned.
commercials.
We come back, our channel is
Yeah.
banned and everything, bro.
All right, so let's get back to it. We ended off on a weird note, but it's cool.
Take two.
Weird.
Do the ladies want to comment
Well,
anything about what he said? Are we still good? Are we still
Honestly, you could have just gotten straight to the point because we understood, or you could have kept it at when you said they take possession of their body autonomy. You could have stopped there. We
Okay,
understood.
okay.
Like we all understood what that meant, bro.
He said,
It
yeah.
was when you did this that it made it seem like it
good? He
was
said
anyway.
bodily autonomy that's crazy. That's PC as hell. I've never in my life heard it described that way, bro. Okay, anyway.
I'm not trying to get us flagged on YouTube or anywhere actually, right? But yeah, the point that we were really making is that hierarchies are important and they had benefit society, and people preferred them, right? People preferred these hierarchies. There's a time where patriarchy was preferred, whatever you describe as patriarchy. I was a small anecdotal story. I'm in the office. Simple story. We're supposed to be punching documents, and there's this thick stack of documents that comes across our desk. I work with a female colleague, and then she tried to punch it, and it was hurting her arm. And then what she simply said to me, which is very telling, is "Toram kabunna." Yeah, what that means is, here, as a man, you do this, right? And that just shows that we had roles, and we never. This is why I think we never fully get through these thoughts. I have a theory about this, by the way, and it all boils down to core beliefs. I think you either have, obviously there's gray in between, but you either have a view that we come from very harsh conditions as human beings, right? Very, very poor conditions as human beings in the past, in our devolved states before the discovery of certain things, as nomadic tribes before the scientific revolution, before the agricultural revolution, where we mastered crop and agriculture, where we could start settling in one area instead of having to move with the seasons. There was a, I don't think we talk enough about what history was like when we were nomadic tribes, because I feel like there's an institution that has kind of usurped that idea of scientific history that makes us just believe that there's a benevolent being who put us in a paradise. And because we ate an apple, that's how everything got screwed, right? So that's the idea that you start off the basis of your thinking about history. And you never really investigate.
Cat, bro.
Oh,
Alienating
it's-
every Christian on this platform.
No, it's because he always goes for.
And he
goes
always
for
does
the
this,
Bible.
bro.
He
Like,
always
I
goes
never
for the
understand,
Bible.
bro. Like
He always goes for
this
the
guy's
Bible.
despise and disdain for the Bible is always
He
so like
always-
apparent here, and he tries
Hey.
to peacify it, but it's just like he will throw those shots in like we don't see that it's happening, bro.
I just want to be clear. I've grown. I think the Bible is one of the best books ever written. And I think it was a net positive for human evolution than a net negative. I've grown. It's one of the best books ever written in history when you study it for its wisdom. And I think the problem with the Bible, I've learned to separate, is the political agendas
No,
that
do it
came.
properly. Do it properly. Wait, Masego, do it properly. You meant to say
Yes, sir.
No problem with the Bible.
I think the problem with the Bible is the political agendas that were then, I think it was co-opted. I think the spirituality of the Bible was co-opted by politicians. And if you study the history, you'll start to see in what areas those messages were then co-opted and why you would even want to use a powerful tool like religion to co-opt and push your own agenda. That's a long discussion. So the point is, you either look at life from that perspective, or you look at life as we come from a terrible place, in the sense that first, we were not at the top of the animal food chain. We were once the hunted. There's also that perspective that we were once roaming around. Before we mastered agriculture, we were moving with the seasons. So if it was dry season and winter and nothing is growing before the agricultural revolution, which is stuff that's documented, we would migrate. We would migrate to where there's better. We'd always be migrating to where there's a better chance of survival. And I believe you also look at so if you look at it that way and you think about these words for these eras of history, but you think about a tribe in that situation, there were some really brutal things that were going on. An example is if you were born with a deformity in this situation, say you're born and something is just not quite right. You have a limp, you can't walk, something is wrong with you, and you were deformed or disabled in any way. You know what the solution was for the tribe? What was the noble or correct thing to do?
Kill him.
They'd kill you.
Kill him. Call the herd. You're slowing us down, fam. You're
You're
slowing
a
us down.
liability to the tribe.
R.I.P. Boxer.
This was the noble thing to do, because if we had to take you along, right, when a pack of cheetahs come, or what animal has, or hyenas, whatever the case may be, whatever we encounter in the savannah, when a threat comes, we now have to consider you. And that's a threat to our entire genetic evolution, because that pack of animals can kill us all when we're talking about the size of those tribes, right? Another important thing I believe to think about this era of history is you either believe, which is something that touches me deeply, you either believed there was actually an era before we discovered language, right? Which is an important technology, by the way, that made us all richer. And you'll start to realize that technology is the only thing that's ever made us richer as people, right? Technology is our mastery of um, our environment, right? You can ban technology and science into the same group. But if you believe there's a time that we existed before language, then you must think, what was it like to communicate during that time? Or what kind of being were we, right? If you can see, what I realize what we do as humans is we compartmentalize our education and our beliefs. We don't join them together. So our education will tell us, for example, that English is a modern language, that there's languages that predate English, like Aramaic and um, Latin is another good root language for English. So English did not always exist. So we can date when English existed. But our education will also tell us that written language did not exist for a very long time. According to our observation, we were not always able to read and write according to our observations. So we theorize about what happened in the past. But you either believe that we had to evolve to a state that we had to invent language. And that was a technological breakthrough for our communication, just like we invented the internet, and that's a technological breakthrough for our communication. So think about, what was it like then in a time where we didn't have language? By the way, the law does not exist without language. The law as we know it. All those rules have to be written down, speaking on the importance of the book. And that's why the rulers in animal farm were the animals that could read and write, because they could set rules. Because outside of the rule of remember, language, as Yuval Noah Harari clearly points out, gave us our ability to collaborate, right, on a set of ideas, because it gave us the ability to create fictions. That's what he puts forward. Absent of that, that ability to collaborate, then we can't create law. And what rules us then is natural law, what they call the law of the jungle. And it's not hard to imagine, because that law still kind of rules us today. In fact, law goes hand in hand with power. Pause on that for a second. Imagine a time where we couldn't write down laws, where natural law was our laws, right? So what's right or wrong then, before we can philosophize and write about what's right or wrong, is, do you have the power to do something or not? Power becomes the law, right? We look at nature and we all intrinsically feel that there's nothing wrong with the lion hunting down the gazelle and, if needs be, catching the baby if the mother is too fast to get away and chowing that baby's throat. The lion has the power to do so. And there's no other system that we can imagine that those animals can organize themselves around. So there was a time where you would rather have manly men, savage men in your tribe, and you would rather tend to them have the power to protect you from the guy who one day, when he's feeling horny, he might take autonomy over your body, right? And then there's no court system for you to go to report that man. You don't even speak the way we're thinking, supposedly, if there was a time before language, right? So language gives us the ability to collaborate better, to evolve. That's either your view, or your view is that God created us perfect in a garden and we could already speak English. Or if we couldn't already speak English, then we had to speak some other language. And God had an ability to communicate with these two beings that he created in this garden. He had the ability to tell them, you're not allowed to eat from that tree. We don't know how. We don't know in what language. We're talking about the first men to ever exist. So that's when there's a contention between your scientific knowledge and your belief systems and your spiritual knowledge. Because if you believe your scientific knowledge points to a time where we didn't have language, then you have to believe, no, but we had language, because God had to somehow tell Adam, don't eat that apple. And then Adam had to disobey that, right? Or the snake, or you believe Somehow you've just filled in that gap with there was some sort of telepathic, energetic exchange of communication. Because how did the snake talk to or tempt Eve, sorry, right? Was it through language? So those are some big questions. So all that to say, and I'm going to say this to get some opinions, right? To say that history is more complicated than we think. Hierarchies are more important than we think. And what the person who's more educated than the person who does not take the time to think for themselves does is they reduce history for you. In the book, we go from having 9 laws to having, but the animals could not understand because they could not read or write, right? So they have there's a part in the book where they talk about simplifying it to, they go from all those complicated laws, that the 7 commandments, to 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. Everyone to understand.
That part also killed me, bro. I was also like,
4 legs bad, 2
I was
legs
so-
better, bro.
They were killing it.
At the end, yeah.
They were killing it, bro. They started cooking. They were even like, no. We said no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheep. I was like, they're killing it. They're killing it.
They were
They're
like,
killing
no
it.
animals shall drink alcohol excessively, bro.
Excessively.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little. It's
Just a
cool,
bit.
though. That's crazy. I was like,
You're allowed to
they're
get
cooking.
tipsy now. Don't get it
They're
twisted now.
cooking. They are cooking. They're cooking.
Bro, that thing was hilarious, man. Like, it was so sad to see, but it was hilarious. And I think, look, Masego, to your point, look, I think when I made the statement initially to say that I think it's timeless,
Yeah.
I don't think it is to simplify the fact that to simplify everything to say that there's no gray area between upper echelon and lower. It's more so to say that the dichotomy, or the reason that there's a dichotomy between the two, is what's timeless. So, for example, if you look at in the book, and even just what you've described about the existence of hierarchies, those hierarchies exist because, number one, as you've mentioned, no 2 people are ever going to be created the same. And above and beyond that, even if they were created the same, their access to information is not the same, because just the context in which they are born is very different. So even if we're in a position where all of us are the same and we are created the same, I don't have the same education as you. I don't have the same access to education as you. I don't get to learn the same things as you. So therefore, my ability to apply my mind is not the same as you. Even if I did have the same access to education as you, my struggles are different. So my ability to engage with that education is very different. So we can look at that with the examples of like the animals on that farm, where in the very early stages, all of them were being taught the alphabet, but you then had somebody like Boxer who was carrying the team in terms of his strength and his need, the fact that he was needed to be able to carry the team in terms of building the windmill. So he had to dedicate most of his time there. And there was a lot of admiration he got from doing such. So his ability to dedicate his faculties to learning these things in and of itself was already limited. So there's a lot of different things that you can, if you want to expand the context, can include to say that it's not as simple as black and white. But I think ultimately the point I'm trying to communicate is this dichotomy has existed forever, because ultimately your access to what you're able to know, your ability to access that, and even when you have that access, the context upon which that you're able to engage with that is very different for different people, and that's based off of so many different things. So I think it's an interesting thing, because another thing you mentioned was just like the fact that these hierarchies are important. And I agree. I think the difficulty now just becomes where, because I don't think hierarchy in and of itself is inherently bad. I think it's just the belief system that because certain people have different faculties that might be of different use in different contexts, that makes them more important than. And I think that's what the book was ultimately communicating. Because let's be real, if people like the quote unquote dumber people that they would describe in the farm, so like your boxes, or let me for those who don't know the animals, the horses, the sheep, the cows, the geese, all of the other animals who didn't have the intellectual capacity to be the lawmakers like the pigs were not there. The pigs would never have been able to accomplish any of what they accomplished because they needed those people to be the best at what they were the best at. Like they needed Boxer to be the strongest, most motivating horse for everybody to follow suit. And he was the best in that particular thing. However, unfortunately, in society, at the end of the day, we tend to prioritize intellectual capability over these other things and therefore say this is more important than the other. And I think you made a very good point in saying that, like, at the end of the day, your ability to communicate is what's going to somewhat determine like your place in said hierarchy as well, because many of the times a lot of what these people were saying were lies. A lot of what these people were saying did not make sense. A lot of what they said took advantage of the fact that these people couldn't understand further beyond what was communicated to them. And so your ability to communicate ended up being, or their ability to communicate rather, ended up being what determined their position in said hierarchy. So it's an interesting thing. And I think especially in today where we've now sort of gravitated towards a modern society, if you are one gifted with the ability to communicate, but more importantly, gifted with the ability to critically analyze what is being communicated to you, your position in hierarchy, in that said hierarchy, changes drastically. Because I think when you look at what happens in that book, a lot of what happened is as a result of also just not having the capacity for critical thinking. So a lot of what they did was just accepted, you know? And that unfortunately happens in today's society. There are so many things I can give examples of. I won't get into the depth of all of them, but I mean, I think one of the things that sometimes comes to mind is, yo, and you know, it's crazy because now I'm going to have to explain so many things just to be able to give context behind this. It's just, you know, when I think people tend to blindly follow into slogans like your Black Lives Matter, or blindly follow into slogans like, hey, let me use Black Lives Matter as an example. It's like,
I think I know the other one you wanted to use.
We're getting canceled today. Today we're
Sorry.
getting
I
canceled.
would go there, but it wouldn't be very demure of me. It wouldn't be very cutesy,
No,
so I'm
It
not
wouldn't
gonna
be
do that.
cutesy.
Keep it
It wouldn't
Not
be cutesy
demure.
if I
Keep it
went there,
PC.
so I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there. I'm in a position where I can talk about Black Lives Matter because I'm black, so it's fine. I can do this.
Kendrick
So,
Lamar said, "Where the hypocrites at? What communities
and
feel
that's
like
my
they're the only
thing.
ones
So
relevant?"
and that's my thing. It's like you get to a point where people will push the idea of a set. There are certain conversations I've been a part of where certain ideas of what it means to be black were imposed on me that I didn't agree with. And the second I disagreed with those impositions, my very blackness was questioned. And if I don't have the critical thinking to be able to understand that my blackness is not attached to somebody's idea of what that looks like, then I follow suit and I start to act and behave in things that I don't believe in. And that's something that happens in so many different things where people identify with something simply because either of the color of their skin, their gender, or whatever the case may be. They identify with that thing based off of the superficial phenotype and they follow that through. There's no critical thinking that comes with it. And it's dangerous because then you become hypnotized to believe that everything that is associated with said phenotype is correct. Hence why 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, until 4 legs were good, but 2 legs were better. And you just had to go with it because these are the people who were telling you that this is the truth. So that's the thing. That's the dangers of not being able to to critically engage with the things that are being communicated to you. But the sad thing about that is when you look at what happens in the book, and this is why I say it's so timeless, is the reason they couldn't even critically engage is because they just didn't have the access. And the same thing happens today where it's like your ability to communicate is a privilege, bro. And if you're born in a situation where your main goal is survival, because you're just trying to look after your family, you're just trying to make sure you get today's meal, you're just trying to make sure that you can get through the next day. You're not sitting on a podcast having a conversation about things like this. So you're not training that ability of yours to be able to engage in conversations like this. So just from the very nature of what you're born in, the circumstances you're born into and you're dealt with and the cards you're dealt with, you're already put in a position where you're not based off of society's like standards of what is important and how you contribute value, you're not even put in a position to be equipped with those standards. And that sucks. So yeah, man, like there's I think I've spoken. Let me let the floor.
Yeah,
do
no,
their
it's
thing. Let me let the
yeah,
floor.
you did. I think we let you speak because you were hitting some very pertinent points and very important topics. But I think from my side, I would like to just comment on that genetic pool, and with regards to your access, right? That genetic lottery pool or whatever, right? Because you see some of the success stories from, like, underprivileged. They say weak times create strong men create weak times create whatever. What's the thing? I'm saying it wrong. Weak
I
people.
know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Wait, hard hard times create strong men. Strong men create easy times create weak men.
There you
Yeah.
go. Cool. So it's like, and that's a juxtaposed position, because it's like that's also not, like for like. There's here we are in a position where we come from hard times.
Man.
So yeah, yeah. So we are in a position where we're not in a position of or we won't say we're in a luxurious position of power, and the people who have created strong, powerful positions continue to hold the wealth for however long time, and continue to hold foothold on many nations, and continue to teach generations of communism or whatever ism you want to throw into the spanner here. I think for me it's more, this is why I say you can't just give the book to someone, because it's more. I don't know if this is because of my genetic lottery pool, but if I found that a lot of life resides around, like, either you survive or I survive, right? Because again, I'm talking to your comment on what you said, Miles, earlier. Life surrounds around either you survive or I survive. There's no picture of survival and where there's both of us. And the more and more we progress, and this is just an observation, I'm not saying I have answers or I've got the right tools to fix this or whatever, but it's just an observation. And the more and more we go, there's more and more bands being created of people going, that guy's got my stuff. No, that guy. Nah, this group right here. And there's just more and more little faction groups just popping up. And it's like, whoa, who said, whoa, what is, okay, now you're fighting for hectic, So, and there's like no picture of survival where we're just surviving. It's always either you're surviving or I'm surviving. There's no, we're surviving. And that's sad. That's the biggest saddest part for me, because that I saw that image in the book and I see that image in real life, and that's the harshest part, because I also come from that background where it's like I was just surviving, even at work, just making ends meet, in the mindset where it was like, whatever happens, I'm just gonna work. I don't care if I'm working harder than this guy, less than this guy, whatever the case may be. I need to dodge where I need to dodge, show my face where I'm showing my face, when I'm proud of my work, when I'm not proud of my work, like high school, but like we were doing when we were kids, But then I started to realize life in a larger sense, on a grander scale. And I started to alter my behavior to where, when I'm at fault, I want to stand in the public and be like, okay, I fucked up, show me. Damn it, show me how, so that I can fix, or whatever the case may be. And I don't think, not to say that I'm better than the next person or whatever, I just think there's a lot of, there is no we survival. There's a me survival and there's a you survival. There is no we survival, yeah. And I think that creates a lot of contention in our critical thinking, because there's so much that I believe, again, just observation, could have been done to make sure that everybody could read. Could have been done to make sure that everybody gets milk. It started with the milk. What happened to the milk? Sorry. It started with the goddamn milk.
And
what happened to the milk? What happened to the milk?
Passed. That's what I knew.
They just ended the chapter. They were just like, and then it ended there. The milk just vanished. What happened to the milk, yo? Sorry.
I'd like to play devil's advocate in this conversation a little bit. Kat, you just mentioned something about how there could have been so much done to make sure that everyone could read. And I come from a different perspective, just because I have a different core belief about life. Um, and let's talk about it. Let's delve into that a little bit more deeply. So I'm going to pose this question. It's a nomadic tribe. Um, you are in the jungle
What, leaning into the
or in the
somatic
safari.
trials, bro. I
Yeah,
swear, you
I
just
think it's
watched.
foundational.
You just watched Tarzan, bro. I'm sure.
Look, it's
I'm convinced, bro.
foundational. So check out this question. We're in the safari somewhere. Somebody gets born. They're deformed. They can't walk. They get born with a deformity that renders them not able to walk, and they have to be carried everywhere, carried into the hut, just carried, right? They born without legs. Let's imagine that. Cat,
Yo,
should
dog, you
that
gave the
tribe,
most disheveled description, dog. That's not fair.
okay?
That's okay. Genetic
Bro, that's not
lottery.
fair. But continue.
Genetic lottery.
So-
It's cool. Genetic lottery. Let's go.
So, Katlego,
Mm-hmm.
we're in a situation where does the tribe decide that we need to make sure that if we're ever faced with a danger, we need to make sure we all survive, or do we dispose of this person? Let me ask you that question. If we dispose of this person,
it sounds like you want to change the thing. You want to change that question. Do we make sure we all survive, or do we dispose of this person? I feel like you were going to.
yeah. If I was just gonna add that if we keep this person, there's a higher risk that the entire tribe will die trying to save this person.
Or trying to save
we-
them,
if-
sure.
So
But
basically, now
keeping
this is a
them, no.
conversation about egalitarianism versus
Yes.
totalitarianism.
Yes, sir.
That's the
Yes, sir.
conversation now.
Yeah, because you said
Okay.
they could have done more to make sure that everyone could read, and I want to get to that. So I'm asking you.
Thing
in
is,
this
the reason I
situation-
can't even accept that as a question, I'm sorry, the reason I can't even accept that as a question, dog, is because the context under which you've created this question is do or die. Like, Cat's conversation is not do or die. He's saying that there's context under which you could have made more room for these people to learn how to read. He didn't say they shouldn't do the jobs that was given to them. It's just they could have been a little bit more time allocated. So the windmill,
they-
in this context
didn't
of the
they-
conversation, wait,
didn't
hold
they-
on. In this conversation, this context,
Didn't they try to teach everyone the alphabet in the beginning of this project? And
yes,
some
they did.
animals
And
were
then,
just learning slower than others.
yes, and that's the thing.
So what more could they have done? There's stuff
allow
to be
them to
done.
learn at the pace.
You need to
learn.
produce
Okay,
food.
are you gonna let me talk, or are you going to speak
All I'm
over
saying
me?
is,
Because
all I'm
speaking-
saying is, okay.
Masego, no,
let me finish it.
no.
Let
No,
me
no, no.
finish it,
I
and then
let
you'll
you
jump in.
talk, bro. I let you talk.
I'm on my best
let you talk.
behavior.
Thank you. So all I'm saying is, because they had a particular agenda that they wanted to push, which is the pushing of the windmill. There was never any point in time at which they said, "Oh no, the other animals are working too slow because they're not able to keep up with the horses who are able to work significantly quicker than everyone else." What they did accept was the fact that everybody's working at a pace that is respectable to them. Everybody looked up to Boxer as the guy who was the hardest working horse because that is the place in which he excelled at. And that's what he was the best at. But it didn't necessarily mean that the contributions of everyone else, because they were slower, was less important. And I think similar parallels can be drawn in the context of the reading. It's now people were not willing to, or it wasn't communicated. I can't say people weren't willing because I don't know whether or not this was the context of the book. That wasn't given. But under the assumption that there was not enough room created for people to be able to learn how to read based off of the pace at which they read, then I can agree with Kat in saying that they weren't making enough efforts to make sure that people were accommodated to their pace, similar to how they were allowing people to work at a pace that's relevant to them. And that's even more displayed by the fact that later on in the book, once people's importance in their ability to work for quote unquote Boxer's death shows you that people were only valued according to a specific agenda that was pushed, which was the building of this windmill or building of whatever projects needed to be built, but never to the education of everyone else, because there was a very clear understanding that if these people become as educated as us who are leading them, we can't fool them. So I agree with Kat.
Okay, so
And that's why I can't say that the conversation you're bringing, where you're giving me a do or die situation where it's you gave me a fox that has no legs, bro. And then all of a sudden now we need to start running away from people who are killing us. Nah, bro, that's not a fair comparison of what was happening in the book. And nor is it a fair comparison of what Kat was talking about. You're using an extreme to try and talk about the context of daily living today. That's not fair.
Okay.
If I
Mute, go for it.
if I may add, points that are to be made. I do have points to make to Miles' earlier comments, but just on this conversation of excluding people and leaving people by the wayside, not putting enough effort to educate them or hand them a helping hand, right? So I think that's part of the problem a lot of people in the Black community have. If we look at a lot of prosperous communities, what you begin to realize is they have a set standard for themselves that they expect everyone within that cultural group or whatever to fit into. And if you don't fit into it, they ostracize you. All right. If we look at Jewish communities, they support each other's business, but they do that because they know they're all united behind the same goal, the same vision, the same ideology. You look at Muslim communities, it's very similar in that way. Married by a certain age, you must be married. You must, you're all invested in the family business. Your grandfather is working in the medical industry. The son does the same. His child does the same to pass down knowledge. And they're all put in the same hard work and dedication towards the prosperity of their communities, right? The problem I think a lot of Black people have is they're trying to unite behind just the color of their skin. And what that leads to is you trying to make room for extended family members or people that you don't know from Adam just because they're Black. And because of that, you're unable to ostracize them because you're trying to unite on something that's superficial, your skin color, right? So I think Masego's point speaks to the idea of having a unified vision or unified goal in a small community. And unfortunately, history has proven to us that in order for you to get to the next level of quote unquote success, there are certain people you will have to leave by the wayside. You know, Afrikaans communities, there are certain things they value and they refuse to accept values that are outside of hard work, of doing things for themselves, of humility. You see that a lot when you look into, I'm forgetting the name of the individual, maybe it's one of you knows it, but in Stellenbosch, there's an idea of having money. Yes, you're an Afrikaans, successful Afrikaner, you have a lot of money, but it's not in their culture to flaunt the wealth, right? And if you start flaunting your wealth, buying extremely fancy vehicles, extremely fancy houses, and not focusing, maybe for lack of a better example, on, let's say they are dedicated to agriculture and the agricultural field, etc. If you're focusing on things outside of that, they ostracize you because you're moving different to what their vision is. So I think it's important to realize, just look at different groups in society. I'm not going to bring up the example I want to make is very controversial, but under his reign, there were a lot of
Bring
things.
the controversy. I'm here for all of it. Bring that controversy,
under
boy. We've
his
already
reign,
had Masego with his air quotes rape, bro. So please bring your controversy.
We have 1 minute 40 left. I just want to add.
Jeez.
All right,
Okay.
cool. Let's pause. Let's bring the
Controversy in part
controversy.
3.
Controversy.
I love it. And I love that the controversy starts every time we're about to end the meeting.
Cool. We're good to go.
Yes, sir.
So the point I was basically getting to is essentially a lot of problems can be fixed. I think especially for Black people, when they understand the reality that you're either in a group that's being exploited or in a group of people that's exploiting, right? Well, that's just my belief. It's fundamental for people to understand that. And when you can identify that you're in the group that's being exploited, you can figure out how to work your way towards. Unfortunately,
I was gonna say, continue that statement, bro. What did you want to say? Which group are you working your way towards, bro?
unfortunately, being in the group of people that's exploiting, quote unquote.
I wanna jump in when you're done.
I don't know how that helps me right now.
Okay.
This
I'm
isn't
just
about
joking.
helping yourself. This right. Sorry.
Nah, joking.
Caught the wrong way. Sorry.
Fair enough. So yeah, that was one point that I was getting to. That unfortunately it is difficult to have everyone be on the same page as you. Groups that have managed to succeed, quote unquote, are groups where they've identified that certain people have to be ostracized. Whether I'm okay with that or not is besides the point. It's just the way things have worked in history. The second point, I guess, was to Miles. What Miles was saying about, he was making a point about things kind of repeating themselves, right? And I think that's definitely the role of, is it Benjamin the donkey? I think.
Oh,
His
he
role
keeps
is
on saying
just
that there's never been a time where it's really been better or worse. It's just the same thing to
it's
some
the same
extent.
thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So
I never
I
thought
think
about it
he's
like that.
kind
That's
of
true.
realized there's always a class of people that are in power, right? And for you to be in power from a maybe physics definition of power, which is the ability to do a certain amount of work over a certain period of time, the people that have had power, people that are able to do the most amount of work over the shortest period of time, right? So very well you could have a group of 50 people on an island, but I could rock up to that island with 3 people and machine guns, and I'm able to do a lot more work over a shorter period of time than you are with the 50 people you have. Therefore, I'm in a position of power, right? So I think Benjamin understands that, and he's seen how, regardless of it being pigs or regardless of it being human beings, there's always been a group of people that has more power. And that group of people with power, whether it's access to information, whether it's technology, artillery, they're the ones that end up on top, right? And I think one of the most disguised forms of power is owning someone's mind, because you are able to do a lot more work with 500 people that believe in your ideology across the world over a short period of time. You just have to convince them that what you're doing is right. And I think we definitely saw that in this book, Manifesting, because Napoleon, through manipulating the minds of people, was able to achieve what he wanted to do, whether it's using them as capital or labor. He was able to get a huge amount of work done over a short period of time by controlling their minds and convincing them that he is right. So definitely Benjamin represents that, and we've seen different cases of that throughout history. Another point, I guess, is to what Masego was talking about earlier, and Masego was making some very profound statements that I can kind of relate to. I think the general, if Masego was to make these statements that he's been making in front of a large group of people that have been influenced, he would be cancelled, or not cancelled. He would be.
No. Say it. Call it what it is.
No,
he would be cancelled. He would be cancelled, and it's
Listen, delete.
We've said worse stuff.
He would be cancelled. But
yeah,
I think
that's the point he's making. Masego is the one who's cancelled in the group, dog.
No, I'm saying we've said worse stuff in previous podcasts. We've said some crazy stuff.
I've seen, bro. I've watched our podcast, bro.
Anyway, sorry.
I know what y'all niggas are about.
Crazy.
I'm cancelled by association at this point.
So it's definitely, I think it speaks to the point I was making about people's minds being controlled. That when you think different to people, you are cast out of the group because you're thinking differently. And we saw that actually in this book. That was definitely something that stood out to me. The point where, and I don't know if this was emphasized on purpose, but Boxer closed his eyes and thought to himself deeply. And he came up with a conclusion that no, Snowball actually stood up for us in the fight. I think that's the statement that was made.
Yeah.
But I
He
think
said
that's very important because he was the only person thinking critically. And I think they specifically said he closed his eyes and thought to himself to allow us to understand that there comes a point in time where someone in the group tries to think outside of the box and he's convinced otherwise. So I think it allows us to also consider, okay, why am I going with the flow in terms of everything I understand about the world, the way the world operates? Maybe I need to close my eyes for a second and think different to everyone. And also be able to realize when I'm being convinced that the way I'm thinking critically is incorrect. Or not incorrect, but I should not be thinking that way. So that Boxer's critical thinking is another thing for me. And I think also the point Miles made about importance, where he said, unfortunately, certain people aren't able to learn certain things, so they can't be important or they can't be quote unquote successful. It's important for us to It's important for us to define what the meaning of important is, right? If you are someone that's not in the economically, you're not in the top 1, top 5%, top 10%, maybe you need to reframe what's important in your life, right? Maybe you need to understand that this is not the game I should be playing. Maybe I need to play a different game. And there are lots of games that you can play outside of a certain system that you're not winning at. So it's a bit unfair for us to expect everyone to be able to win at the game. The numbers don't make sense. We can't all be in the top 1-5%. So yeah, you're saying?
I think to the point I wasn't making was to say that you must expect everyone to be the same. It's more so to say that there were agendas that were pushed where certain things were prioritized over other things. So in this case, I'm going to break it down into simpler terms where you have intellectual importance and physical importance. Physical importance will be those who build the windmill. Intellectual importance will be those who think about the laws that are made, right? So under physical importance, Boxer led that group. And it was never a thing whereby people's importance was diminished based off of the amount of effort they could put. So Boxer was often described as being as strong as 3 horses, 4 horses. Nobody else was ever described as being as strong, but nobody else was also ever described as being unable to carry their weight in that department. So all of their contributions mattered. They were all needed to build that windmill. Boxer couldn't build it alone, and it was never made to seem as though he could. And that's why everybody was used to build that particular thing. Then you look in the intellectual importance part where it was very clear that somebody like Boxer was going to take a very long time to read. But for the pigs, it was a thing of, we're not going to prioritize trying to get people to understand or trying to get Boxer and the other people to try and read as well as the rest of us, because we feel that they could better be suited towards all those other things. I also think there was an uncommunicated understanding that if you get people like Boxer and others to be able to understand intellectually how to read and critically think, their control over them to exert dominance in the physical importance wouldn't have been as strong. There was no ways they would have been able, especially if Boxer had like critical enough thinking to be able to think differently when he wasn't educated. There's no ways you would have been able to convince Boxer that Snowball didn't actually contribute towards the fight. And there was an understanding of that. It wasn't communicated, but you can somewhat infer that from the way that the pigs were portrayed by being so sly and so snarky. So that's ultimately what I'm speaking to. I'm not speaking to the sense that people aren't as important just because they're important in different domains. I definitely think and agree with the fact that people should be somewhat steered towards where they are better suited. But I don't think, however, that now just because somebody is stronger, or rather they're stronger but they're not as smart, the person who is smarter but not as strong should now suddenly be seen or deemed as more important. Because ultimately, the person who is smarter, while they might have been able to come up with the plans necessarily to do the things, it doesn't make the people who are stronger to capable of carrying out said things less important. And the reason I felt like that's what the way they were being portrayed was because Boxer was killed after he stopped being strong. You know what I mean? Like, they really could have just let Boxer live. It wasn't a thing of if Boxer was going to just stay alive, suddenly now, like, all of the resources of this farm was going to go to waste. Suddenly now the farm was going to just, like, stop striving, you know? Boxer was somebody who had a lot of wisdom in the domain of being able to build, and there was a lot that he still probably could have been able to contribute during his retirement. There was a lot he was still going to learn. There was a lot of life that he still had to experience, but his importance was only seen as far as he was able to push. And once that value was gone, they didn't care for him anymore. So for me, it's like I think there was definitely a way in which people's importance was prioritized simply because there's also a manipulative gain that could be taken from that. And that's why people were able to even play off the fact that no, this thing says horse slaughterer, but no, it's actually just a vet who just didn't change the thing. Like, bro, even by the time they had figured out that this thing had said that this is a horse slaughterer, the horse carriage was already going away. The only person who could read it was Benjamin because he was smarter than the rest, but he wasn't really capable of doing much more, you know? So it's I think that's the point I was trying to communicate. I wasn't necessarily saying that like you must now try and get everybody to the same level of education because it's not impossible. Masego said this in the beginning, and I fully agree with it that we are all born different, and there are certain things that we are all born with that I think once you engage with at its best capacity, is more likely going to propel you towards a particular domain of success. What I am saying, however, in this particular book, that the intellectual part was not as emphasized. And it's because there's an understanding that if they did emphasize that, their control over them wouldn't have been as strong.
Do you think it was a conscious decision?
100%. 100%. Because why were the pigs the only ones that were getting educated? Why were the
Do you
pigs
think-
and the dogs only?
What I
No,
mean by
they
conscious is
tried. Hold on. They tried to educate every animal in the beginning. and
When
some animals-
Snowball was there, they did that. As soon as Snowball was gone, that stopped. That happened when Snowball was still there.
Yeah, but my point is that the initial conditions, the opportunity was there for everybody to learn, and then there was a realization that everyone will not learn at the same rate. I think what the author tries to do specifically by making all of these characters so different is to make a deep philosophical criticism of first socialism and then communism, right? And embedded in the ideas of socialism and communism is the idea that as human beings, you can make the world more fair, right? That's one of the core tenets of socialism. That's one of the core tenets of communism. It's the idea that you can make the world more fair. And that might seem like a simple statement, but it extends to the level where you believe that you can design a better world than God designed. It might not immediately appear that way, but I'm going to try and make the argument now in this next leg to prove that that is the intention, and that's what's underlying these philosophies. So let's talk about it. Karl Marx himself, right? Karl Marx, as he was growing up, people who study his early poetry, before he started writing in economics, Karl Marx was a poet. And that's why some of his ideas affect us till this day, because I believe they were creative and they touched a very special part of us. And I think those ideas sneak themselves into our conversations in ways that we wouldn't necessarily recognize. Miles, you make the point that just because um, Boxer was more of a brute force type person, was more physically strong, and the pigs were more intellectual, it doesn't mean that boxers' work was less important. Underlying that idea is the idea of equality, right? Or if we are even to refine it, equity. The idea that, okay, they're not bringing the same things to the table, but there's a way to adjust the importance scale to try make their work of equal importance, both the intellectuals and the physical and the brute force workers. And nature doesn't see it that way. Nature is indifferent, and nature does have hierarchies of importance as well. To put it simply, from the religious perspective, you want to believe that fundamentally, I guess it just depends on what context you're speaking about things in. And I think the danger of certain ideas is their reduction. The point I'm trying, so what point am I trying to make? If think about the cells that make up your body as an example, as an analogy. Each one of the cells that make up your body, and this was the African view of nature and reality. This is African, what's the word? Philosophy. African philosophy has the saying, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. It's then repeated in a very, very famous spiritual occult book called the Kybalion. But that same spiritual concept is then taught in the Bible. Miles, you're muted, by the way. Just note it. That same spiritual concept is then taught in the Bible, right? In the Lord's Prayer, we say, God, as it is in heaven, give us this day our daily bread, as it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth. Something to that degree, right? I'm forgetting a little bit of the Lord's Prayer here.
Bro, just
right? Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There it
bro,
is.
I know they forced you to say this prayer so many times in high school. You can't have walked yourself that far out of the prayer, bro. That's crazy. Anyway, continue.
Sorry. There we go. So, but that's the saying. And there's that same saying ties back to the African philosophical saying, because the literature comes, the ideas come, the roots are in African philosophy. And what is that saying speaking to? Well, it's really a scientific view of the world. The idea that there are certain things, if you would deem them to be universally true, that it happen anywhere you are in the universe. So gravity ideally should apply whether you're on Earth or anywhere else. The laws of gravity should apply wherever you are in the universe, right? According to how they are defined. And the laws of gravity, because they apply everywhere, that means they should also apply in things that you wouldn't necessarily assume gravity would apply in. Let's take an easier law to transcend and retrofit into higher systems, like the law of energy conservations, right? And E equals mc squared, the laws of the Einstein equation. That should apply when we're having a conversation, not only to physical phenomena, like when I'm going down a roller coaster track, right? And the energy that I'm coming down with needs to be greater than the energy I need to go up with in order to go over the heap. Those laws can make you accurately measure whether your cart will go over the heap or not. And the physical laws of gravity will govern how much energy is put into your ascent and descent. But those same laws should apply in a conversation, which is not a place where you're expecting to see those laws. They're universal. They apply in anything that we can speak about. I say that to say, circling back to the as above, so below, as within, so without. There's a way to look at how we studied knowledge is we look at other organisms to teach us stuff about bigger organisms. So we take it's not difficult to understand how you can take a microcosm to understand a macrocosm. So let's look at the microcosm that is the human body before we talk about how humans interact, right? And in the microcosm of the human body, there is a hierarchy of importance. Each cell that makes up your body is an individual. You can consider that an individual. But even in your body itself, energy is not distributed equally. And if one day something happened and your arm was infected, right, and it was threatening the death of the entire organism, which is your body, you would choose to cut off that arm, right? Now, it's easy to then just say that just because the arm it doesn't do the same work as the brain, it doesn't mean that the arm's work is less important than the brain. But that's not how it if you were given a choice to save your arm or your brain, you choose the brain. That speaks of a hierarchy of things that are important.
I fully agree with that. But
I
this is why I
understand that.
disagreed with you.
I
This is why I
understand that.
disagreed with you
So let
earlier.
me show you. I
To
know
an
you're
extent.
smart. I know you're smart, but the proponents of Marxism aren't. And it shows in the way that they try to control society, in the way that they try to central plan everything, right? It's based off the idea is really is that it's based Marxism and communism is based on fake ideas, on ideas that are not real. And I'm going to make a controversial statement. We talk about controversial statements. My controversial statement for the night is that Marxism, one, is a religion and it's more akin to Satanism than anything altruistic. Because Karl Marx, again, I spoke about studying his early works. First of all, he used to write about Satan all the time. And he studied deeply on a philosophical level the things that Satan believed in. And when you study his early poems, you start to see that Karl Marx had somewhat of a disdain for reality in the way that it existed. And his makeup, his psychological makeup, was that of believing that he can create a better world. So if we think about that in the context of these economic philosophy, socialism is the reality that Marxists want to create. And then communism is this utopic state that you can consider the heaven. The idea that everybody's sharing resources equally, right? All the resources that we manifest are shared amongst people equally, that we can control the prices of things, and humans are in this utopia where they're not in competition and they are not forced to do labor that they don't care about. All you have to do is read the Communist Manifesto to understand what communism actually is. And you'll start to realize that communism is like a heaven-like state that these very sick people, socialists, preach to people, right? Preach to people, and then if and whenever socialism fails to reach that state of communism, they would always argue that socialism was not executed correctly. So this heaven-like state where everybody's just equal and resources are distributed fairly, and we're no longer in a competition for resources, it never comes. It never comes. But it's something that people can look up to who are less educated or less perceptive, I believe, of what the world is really like, right? When you decide as the more powerful organism to take a drag of your cigarette, you're not considering what the individual cells of your lungs are feeling. In fact, there's a concept in philosophy called cosmic indifference, right? And it's then further echoed in the Taoist belief of yin and yang, right? That the universe is neither good or bad, but a balance of both light and darkness, both good and bad. And the communist would have this megalomaniac belief that they are the good people and the capitalists are the bad people, right? You will see it in all the dialogues of the politicians who take on these economic philosophies, right? The EFF, again, is Marxist. The ANC is socialist, Marxist, and MK. And there's always this, and I think what Karl Marx was trying to show us, right? 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, is that there's always this attempt to reduce society and get them into a group thinking state, right? And there's very deep thinkers that then argue that this form of thinking appears in other places. Like, for example, there's an argument that the whole LGBTQI movement, in the way that it conducts its agendas, political agendas, is a form of Marxism. So there's this recurring pattern of capitalist bad, socialist good, right? white monopoly capital versus the working class, as if the working class has no capacity for evil, as if the capitalists have no capacity for good. And then if we go into it actually deeper, you start to see how this perversion then affects certain layers of society. It devoids from the reality of the fact that people are very different, right? I think I think the author specifically in the book makes the point of introducing a character, which is a mare, a slay queen. And while everybody's trying to figure out how the farm is supposed to run, this one just cares about wearing ribbons. It comes in, strutting in, wearing a beautiful ribbon. And while the pigs are planning, okay, so this is how we're going to survive, this is how we're going to run the farm, the question that this mare asks is, are we still going to get ribbons though? Right? Full on slay queen. Right? And he shows you that. And then there's a cat in the story that only shows up after the work is done. There's also that character. When everybody's done with the work and everything, then this cat shows up. It's always finding a way to disappear when the hard work is supposed to start. And capitalism is really the idea, which we don't understand. And I think it's going to take a long conversation. But capitalism is, I think, fundamental to both capitalism and communism is the idea of private property and individualism. Capital says we should look at everyone as an individual, start there, and try sort out simple rules that we can build society from. Capitalism, in my opinion, is humble, where socialism is arrogant, in the sense that, again, to my point, the socialists, or the communists, they believe that they understand the true nature of humanity. They believe they can build a better world than the world that exists. They believe in a utopian world that they want to create. And every attempt to create that society just leads to how the world actually is and not how they want it to be. And I think this is what this book is about. I think as soon as Julius Malema convinces enough people to take the land from the white people, we're going to start to realize that white people were not the problem. We're already realizing that white people were not the problem. Now that the ANC cadres have had enough time in power, we're starting to rethink our proposition. Like, maybe we should give some departments to white folks. You understand? And I think all of these things tie back to our understanding of what it means to be human and what is our history as human beings. So I'm saying that, Miles, to say that I think I was really speaking on the fact of we should have taught everyone. Again, so you know what's the biggest sin in the, okay, let me not say the biggest sin, but what caused the fall of the greatest adversary in the Bible? It was jealousy of God, right? And that's a metaphor. So there's an angel who thought they could be just as great as God. And I think that's the sin of socialism. And I think that's the sin of communism, right? They believe that they can organize society better than the forces of nature. That's what communism is all about. They believe that, first of all, and this is written in the Communist Manifesto. In the second chapter of the Communist Manifesto, they state that the communism can be summarized in one sentence, which is to abolish private property. So in somewhere inside of a communist head is the idea that we should all own nothing, and then there should be a central organization that controls how resources are distributed. And then more intelligent socialists even try to extend that to, it doesn't have to be a human organization. It could be algorithms, tech, maths that decide where resources should go. That, I believe, is an attempt to redesign life. That's a denial of death in this perfect utopia that they're trying to create. It's a denial that the lion really does chow on the baby gazelle, and the pack of hyenas will pick the weakest out of the bunch to eat. That's something we can't reconcile in our altruistic view of the world. And as humans, we try to impose an idea of what a good society looks like. And it becomes then very difficult. And I think in this metaphorical, in my perspective of the metaphorical story of the Bible, there was a powerful message in the idea of Satan trying to be God. And communists are trying to be God, and they're trying to redefine, in my opinion, what human nature is all about, what life is really all about. Just another point on cosmic indifference, right? To the Asian philosophers, to the African philosophers as well. When you step outside in the morning and you walk over 10 ants, right? It doesn't matter which god those ants were praying to, and you did not have an agenda against those ants, but they're going to die under your foot. Similarly, if if lightning, if a hurricane strikes and kills a whole nation, um, uh, it's not. It's nice for us humans to cope, to create a fictional story of how maybe we're getting hit with all these natural disasters because God does not approve with what we're doing. And it's easier for us to cope. But it's harder to think that there's just a hierarchy of importance to life, and that there are things that are bigger than us in the hierarchy. Just speaking about importance. Again, it goes back to core beliefs. You either believe that God created us as the highest specimen, the highest form of intelligence in the universe, and we are his greatest project, which is a nice thing to believe if you're religious. Or you believe that, like, I am just another piece of this grand thing called the universe. And if a hurricane is deciding to hit here today, it doesn't matter if I was a good person who tried to take care of my kids and try to improve my community. I got washed away as well. So there's a conversation to be had about core beliefs. I believe it's a long one. I believe it's a difficult one. And I think the author was aware of all of these things and critiquing all of them masterfully.
So I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to respond to. Because there were a few things, because I feel like a lot of what you said was a direct response to some of the things I said. So before I speak, because I'm going to speak,
Yes, sir.
I don't
Yes,
know
sir.
if anyone else wants to speak, because I don't want to just like make this back and forth between two people. I don't think that's fair. So
No, go for it.
does anybody want to say?
Yeah, no, go for it.
That's cool. Go for it.
So,
We're in it.
like, I think there's a lot of what you articulated that I agree with, and I don't even think fundamentally I ever disagreed with, because
Yes, sir.
there were a lot of backings where I've been saying to you that I completely agree with the idea that I don't think people are created the same. I don't think
Yes, sir.
people start at the same place, and I think even if you were to make the
I don't know if it's
false
just me, but your volume went down, Miles.
A little bit, yeah.
better,
There
better.
you go.
Yes, sir.
Even if you were to make the false belief that people are created the same, the context in which they are created is not the same. So therefore, just by the way the society, like the world is built, we can never be the same. That I've completely accepted. And I think in many ways, I think capitalism tries to somewhat create a world in which you are directly merited you are directly credited according to your merit, directly credited according to the value that you bring into society. What I was ultimately fighting was never what you've described, which is a lot of the
Yes, sir.
extremist points. So a lot of the extremist points that you were creating, which is what I was disputing and why I'm saying that can't be used as an argument against this, was saying things like, for example, in a situation where if I've got an infected arm or an infected leg, am I keeping the arm or am I getting rid of it to save the body? Of course I'm getting rid of it to save the body, because you're talking about do or die situations. You're talking about contexts in which one or the other you have to choose. What was described in the book, however, was not a one or the other situation. That is what I'm fighting against. And I think that is where you and I can actually agree is what Marxism unfortunately propagates. But maybe this is where you and I are missing each other. So Marxism propagates the idea that everybody is born equal, that everybody has equal access to opportunity, etc., etc. But then as its lifespan continues, it starts to realize the faults, and hence why a lot of the doctrines that are initially propagated by this belief system end up changing. This is articulated by the fact that commandments that started off as no animal shall drink became no animal should drink to excess. Maxims that started off as 4 legs good, 2 legs bad became 4 legs good, 2 legs better. etc., etc. So as the as time progressed, the maxims often changed because there was an understanding that that equality that they tried to build did not exist. Right. So what I was arguing against was never against the idea that in certain contexts, importance has to be prioritized according to survival. But I gave the context or the example of somebody like Boxer who, for much of his life during past the rebellion, his importance couldn't have been denied. Like there's a part of us that part of every single one in this room that identifies with Boxer's character, which is the idea that I'm gonna work harder, I'm going to push more, I'm gonna do more, and everybody on the farm was able to identify the fact that this man's value can never, or this horse's value rather, can never be denied based off of the fact that he carried this project. And many times when many of the animals probably felt like they couldn't continue, they saw him continuing and working harder. And that's what got them through a lot of the times. It wasn't Napoleon's words. It wasn't Squealer's promises. It wasn't any of those things. It was a lot of the time just being able to see a fellow comrade who in the face of adversity consistently pushed himself above and beyond to be able to get the project done. That's why people respected him so much, and that's what pushed people towards working so hard. And even at the end of all of that, they still killed him once his value started to diminish. And I think, unfortunately, that's what socialism eventually becomes. The realization that people's value is not going to be determined off of some philosophical idea that everybody's equal, but rather off of the fact that people bring different things to the table at different points in their life. And that's a reality that nobody can escape. So, in many ways, that's something that I completely agree with you. What I was disagreeing with was the fact that you were using absolutes to convey this. Because if we're going to look at the context of Box's death, Box's survival in this context would not have stopped like it wouldn't have prevented the farm from moving forward. It wouldn't have been a thing of if Boxer survived. Now suddenly the second, third, fourth, and fifth windmill that needed to be built was going to stop being built. You know what I mean? But they still chose to kill him anyway. The reason they could get away with killing him was because of this very clear understanding of the importance of education. They took that away, or they made sure that this was not a priority to the animals. Because if they understood this fundamentally, they would never have been able to accept the idea that Boxer was going to be taken away to his death. They would have rebelled against the pigs immediately. They would never have been able to be convinced by the things that the pigs were saying. So that's what I'm ultimately arguing against. I'm not arguing against the idea that people are born different. People have different capacities for understanding. I'm arguing against the fact that because people have different capacities for understanding, we should not be equipping people with the best possible position to actually make informed decisions. Because these people were not able to make informed decisions. Their decisions were being made for them. That's what this book, to me, ultimately represents. The taking away of power for people to be able to make decisions by taking away their access to...
Totalitarianism.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
taking away their access to said education based off of the idea that if they actually make people equal and actually give them equal access, then the people who want to have superiority over other people are not going to have it. And in that sense, I can agree with you that maybe some of the, because I don't want to pretend like I know the history of Marxism like that
20
to say
seconds
it's,
left. Yeah.
okay, let me restart it and then I'll continue. The point I was trying to make ultimately was, or rather, actually, I think to where I was going with this now was you made the point, you started using some like religious anecdotes to somewhat describe a lot of your ideas of why you felt socialism was sinful. I can't comment on the history of Marxism because I don't know it like that, but I'm going to go off of the points that you're making for the sake of this conversation. So, if we're looking at the idea of it being sinful and trying to create their own society against what the laws of nature provide and against what the ideas of God provide, then in many ways, I can fully agree with you that what was happening in the book was that. It's not to say so much that, okay, before I make that point. So much of what was happening in the book was that because the pigs now were determining every law. The pigs now were pretending to be gods amongst people that they were supposedly supposed to be equal amongst.
They gave the commandments. I think that was intentional.
That
This
was
book
that
is
was the first indictment of what was happening. And I feel like if you didn't catch that, like, yeah, no, I get it. I also saw the same thing where, like, when they said that these were commandments, and even just to go as far as to try and simplify the commandments to one commandment, which is exactly what Jesus did, taking all 10 and trying to simplify them into one, which is love thy neighbor as I have loved you. The same thing happened here. But unfortunately, the way the commandments were changed was not to include or to simplify the commandments, but so as to put them on a pedestal that diminished everybody else's value on the farm. And that's what I mean. And the reason that they were able to do that was because they took advantage of the lack of education, which is a very different thing from what a godly view would do, which is it has never, and this is, I think has always been one of the fundamental principles behind Christianity, has always been, at least from its roots, not necessarily the way it's practiced today, but from its roots has always been this idea that God has never imposed the position of you having to choose him. He's always given you the ability to choose him. And there are benefits that come with that. There are disadvantages that come with it, and vice versa. There are disadvantages that come with that and vice versa. So he's always giving you the ability to choose. In socialist construct, or particularly in this book, choice was never there. And they made sure that they took away that choice by taking away people's ability to critically think. And that's what I was communicating. That's why I was saying that there's a very specific reason why they emphasize people's abilities to working hard, because working hard might give you a sense of nobility in the immediate term. But once your ability to stop working hard stops coming through, your value is gone, because you can't think past the output you're able to give, because you were never taught to. And once Boxer was never able to give any more output, his value was gone. And that's why they killed him. And that's why they were even able to manipulate the other animals on the farm to believing that he was being taken to a hospital, because they were never educated to think critically beyond that. And that was intentional. It was even so much said in the book that it seemed as though certain animals on the farm were getting richer and richer, particularly the pigs and the dogs. They tried to give the explanation that maybe it's because there was more pigs and there were more dogs on the farm. But there's also a reason why there was more dogs and there was more pigs. If we're taking this to a biological point of view, biology doesn't even allow you to be able to reproduce during times of famine. So during times of famine where things are scarce, your body typically stops, one, being able to produce spermatocytes as well. And for females, you stop being able to produce. This is why they go into amenorrhea. They're not able to produce because the conditions are not likely for them to be able to survive the production of new offspring. So one of the things that was consistently described in the book was, even though the conditions of the farm were becoming richer, it seemed as though the animals were consistently getting hungrier, poorer, and more desolate than ever. And their numbers were not increasing by any more than was necessary to keep the functioning of the farm necessary. However, the pigs and the dogs were consistently fed, consistently getting everything they needed. Their numbers were far outgrowing everyone else's, and their access to education never dwindled because they were the ones who were prioritized on the farm. It might have been that way in the beginning, that everyone was prioritized, but it stopped being that under Marxist law, where it started to realize the deficits of that and it started to move away from that. So there are things I agree with, but I agree with them because of the context of the book created, not under the idea that you can use it like extremist examples to somewhat convey that. Because, like I said, I can't use the example of I'm saving an arm or a leg over a brain, bro. That's a completely different thing, because that's not what the book was communicating. There was never a point in time people were sacrificed for the sake of the greater good. They were sacrificed because they posed threats or because they didn't have value, not because if they didn't go, everyone else was going to suffer. They were taken out of the picture because if they didn't go, potentially the pigs would have suffered. It's a very different thing.
If
Okay, sorry, quick one. I would just add a layer of complexity to say that in the I think that it is that extreme example is relevant in the sense that the pigs did think that their enrichment was the greater good. I strongly believe so. So I
Except for
think
Snowball.
sorry?
Except for Snowball.
Except for Snowball.
Yeah, except for Snowball. But think about it like this. When I cut off my arm to save my body, I'm doing it for the it's easy to say from the greater good if you're looking at it from the perspective of me, the human being that needs to survive. But for the arm, it's a death sentence. And I think that if you take that and superimpose it on what's happening at the farm, and I think the philosophical nature of this book, in the same sense, the pigs themselves thought cutting Boxer off was for the greater good, because in the context, remember, in their world, when you stop being useful, you need to die.
Weren't they talking
That's
about
normal in their
retirement
world.
in the books?
That's my
They
thing.
were,
They talked about the
yes.
time. That's not true. I don't believe that's true because
sir.
if they believed that, number one, there would not have been a need to lie about where Boxer was going. There wouldn't have been a need to manipulate people's beliefs as what was happening. And number two, there wouldn't have been a sudden need to change all of the commandments as well and say that, oh no, well, technically this wasn't a commandment, but there wouldn't have been a need to manipulate the idea that all of a sudden this retirement thing was not a thing.
You see, I see it a little bit differently. I think
Don't say I think again. He did it.
I did.
Sorry.
I did. So I hear what you're saying, Miles. However,
I think
Should
no,
I?
no. My fundamental my fundamental thesis that I'm putting forward here about life and life in this book, right, is that the nature of all the animals is self-preservation, and the nature of reality self is self-preservation, versus an altruistic view of what life is supposed to be. And I think that everything they did was towards those ends.
self-preservation.
The pigs, to preservation. So in a similar way, and I might be off with this example, you let me know. In a similar way, politicians have to kind of lie to their constituents to reach a particular end, especially when it comes to concern the preservation of their own power, which they believe is for the greater good. Right? You say they wouldn't have had to lie because you're looking objectively, not subjectively, at what the greater good is. My argument is that from the pig's perspective, what they did, including the lying, was for the greater good. You see, politicians have this double standard all the time as well, where they change rules all the time. We just saw an example of Floyd Shivambu exiting the EFF as an example, right? And Floyd Shivambu exits the EFF, and the EFF has a constitution that doesn't allow members to exit the party and then rejoin. And we just saw Julius Malema live on television say that, the EFF has a constitution that once you leave the party and join another one, you're not allowed to come back. But for Floyd, I've offered him an exception. He said it live to all of us. Whenever you want to come back, you can, because you are not a member, you're a founder, is what he said.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, I want to, if I could, even Snowball was acting in self-preservation. It just depends, again, like I said, you can't just give this book to someone because it just depends on what your perspective of self-preservation is. If I win, doesn't mean you lose. You know? I win doesn't mean you lose.
Yes,
I could be self-preserving, wanting you to win. Like, for instance, right now, I want Masego to get 50 million because I know at least 5 Uchachans. Oh, Uchachans. I want him to get it. You know, I want Mute to get 100 million. Because Uchachans at least one. Or he'll put me on game on how he get that 100 million. You know? It's selfish. It's selfish. Yes, I don't want my next door neighbor to get 100 million. Why? Because I don't know him. Shame, he might need it. It's selfish. It's selfish, you know? It's self-preservation. But I just think there's two perspectives to it. It's like you can do self-preservation that way, where you see justice as getting over on someone, or you can do self-preservation the other way, where you can kind of relay trust to someone and hope that they can trust you. That way, okay, I can build something off of this. This guy's tough, actually. I'm not tough at all. Now I've got a bodyguard and he's got someone to cook for him. Thank God. He's on the front line risking life and death. You're in the kitchen risking a burn. Self-preservation, both sides.
I'm going to put one more idea. Sorry, Mute, go for it.
Yeah, appreciate it, Masego. I'm saying, just if I can add on to that point Miles was making, is I think can be appreciated better as an observation, not as a simple black and white, right or wrong perspective. When he was talking about Boxer not being educated by the pigs who were in command. So I think that's why I also asked, do you think it was a conscious decision? Because from my perspective, it wasn't a conscious decision. That's just an example of our nature, like our innate behavior as human beings, right? If I ask all of you here, if there's an extended family member or someone you've come across that you really want to improve their situation, and I want to ask you, well, you could easily split your salary halfway between you and that person you're trying to help, but you don't. Does that mean you don't want that person to be successful? No.
So
I think there's an understanding there that what the mission you are on or where you are trying to go involves having to avoid getting this person to catch up to where you're at in order for you to get there, and create the conditions under which you believe that person can thrive. Whether that's right or wrong, that's just that's just our
I agree with
that.
Nature. I agree with that. But then my question then becomes, in what sense can anyone explain here where Boxer's survival would have been detrimental to the farm?
Miles, I might be shooting in the dark, but I think what I saw was that Boxer was dying of exhaustion.
Here's the thing as well,
am I
Miles.
correct? Right? And if he was in that state, if the main goal for the farm is productivity, some extra resources would have needed to be allocated
the resources
to nurse Boxer's health. In a world where they're used to, when you're not useful anymore, you die. That was their normal world, even in the beginning, when the humans were running the farm, right? So I think survivalist instincts come root here.
Okay, then I can then ask you the same question back.
Yes,
why is it then when the idea that Napoleon was going to die when he was drunk, because they didn't know that the effects of being drunk was just a hangover, why didn't they just kill him?
That's a good question. Why didn't they? I didn't get that far.
Why didn't they just kill him? So there was a point at which, where, just for context, there was a point at which Napoleon had gotten drunk. And everyone thought he was gonna die. In fact, Squealer came to announce to the pigs, not to the pigs, to all of the animals, that Napoleon is dying. Why did they not just kill him? Because trying to nurse him back, trying to get him back to health, would have been a waste of resources just as much then.
I think in all fairness, Napoleon is word. They won't think to kill their leader or to kill their master.
That's the point I'm making. I agree with you. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that this is why I'm saying it's intentional. I don't believe there was ever a point in which we're just saying people's importance is based off of like the value that they're bringing, because For men,
But-
bro, like you can
but-
never just like downplay the amount of value that Boxer brought to that farm. None of those things would have been built without him. None of them. And I say none of them, not because he was the one who built them, but because he was the motivation of the farm. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like everybody looked up to this guy. Every time everyone else felt like, nah, they're not gonna be able to succeed. All they saw was this man uttering under his breath, I will work harder, bro. And that motivated everybody to keep pushing. So in many ways, I feel like a lot of what they were able to achieve would never have been achieved without Boxer. But the second his value was questioned, the second he was potentially not going to be able to produce as much as he could, gone. It wasn't even thought about.
Are you saying
It
that's the
wasn't even thought of-
realization, or you disagree with it? I think that's the thing. Yeah, is it? You're just saying it's unfortunate.
What are you asking me? Sorry.
Are you saying it's wrong what they did, or you're just saying it's unfortunate?
He's saying they were aware.
Like,
He's saying they were aware.
I'm saying
of
that they're
the-
aware. I'm saying that to claim that it was ignorance on their part is not true. I'm saying that to say that because if it really wasn't true, if it really wasn't a thing of they were unaware, there's no need to be
no,
lying.
but my point
There's no need
was
to be
about the
taking
education,
Hmm?
the education part. My point was about
No,
the
but I'm
education.
saying long term, look at the effects of what this education does for them. Why is it that they're only focusing on educating the dogs and the pigs? Because in the long term, and on top of that, why is it that they are consistently changing these commandments and then convincing these people that these commandments always look the way that they did? Because they understand that if these people cannot critically think for themselves, they can never oppose us. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, perhaps there's a case of injustice there, Miles. Perhaps there is a case for injustice, and it's a very specific point you're making. And I think it would take investigation, deep investigation.
I think that case of injustice is exactly the point that they're trying to make as the problem with Marxism, which in many ways I think is what you were arguing, which is the
Yeah.
fact that eventually this thing degenerates to a point in which the people who were initially propagating this idea of this equality realize that that's not realistic, because for it to be realistic, everybody has to be of the same mindset, everybody has to be of the same autonomy, everybody has to have the same level of contribution to the of intellectual contribution. And if that happens, their ability to control said society doesn't exist. And so they slowly start to change the context under which that exists. They slowly gravitate towards other situations where they start to play God, and they take advantages of the weaknesses that allow them to play such God. And I think that's ultimately what you're speaking to, which is why I was saying I don't disagree with the fundamentals of what you're saying. What I disagree with is the extremist view, number one, that's how the point needs to be made. And number two, the fact that there was no intention behind a lot of the decisions that were made. Because if there was also no intention, what is the point of taking Snowball's idea and then lying and saying that it has always been Snowball's idea? What is the point of kicking Snowball out and then trying to lie and say that, no, but this nigga, and they actually never fought for us. This nigga was against us from the very beginning. In fact, he was the leader of the people who tried to kill us. That's the level of propaganda that they try to. All of that was intentional. None of that was just happening for the sake of the farm. That was self-preservation.
Okay.
That was self-preservation.
Yeah, I agree.
On the side point.
Yes, sir.
No, this is completely on a different topic. From what Miles mentioned about them lying to people on the farm or animals on the farm that conditions were improving. I think that's so relevant to how the news and politicians can report to people that there's prosperity and conditions are improving. But when you understand economics from the fundamental side and understand how your money is being taxed from you, how property prices are increasing,
exactly why you
cetera.
guys work so hard to understand what you understand. Sorry, continue.
They can easily convince you that you having R1 million today versus not having R1 million 10 years ago is a sign of economic prosperity, even though the value of the R1 million you have today is way less than the R1 million you had previously. So I think that was kind of an example where the animals on the farm were being preached to that things are improving, but they couldn't feel it in their stomachs.
Exactly.
They couldn't
They could
feel
never
that they
feel
were
it.
actually things were improving. So that's definitely relevant to
And,
our
and
society
think
today.
about it. Even when certain commandments were changed, they were not changed to the benefit of the farm. They were changed to the benefit of the pigs, because they were saying things like, "No animal can drink in excess." Who are the ones drinking? The other animals didn't have any access to liquor. They weren't drinking shit. They were just watching other niggas get drunk, bro. And the only reason they even went back to go and examine that was because they were like, I thought niggas couldn't drink. And then they realized, no, we can't drink to excess. They didn't even have access to this thing. Why did they change the slogan from four legs good to 2 legs bad, from 4 legs good, 2 legs bad to 4 legs good, 2 legs better?
Because they
It's
were
not
walking.
because
They started
it's not
walking on 2 legs.
Exactly, because the pig started walking on 2 legs, not because other animals started working on 2 legs, because the pig started walking on 2 legs. That's why I'm saying nobody can tell me that it's not intentional. Everything they did there was intentional, because they understood, if I can take advantage, and this is a point that I think one of you guys made earlier on, which is the idea that the biggest form of unspoken control is control over the mind. If I can control the way you think, I have control over everything. I'm gonna get what I want to achieve much quicker. And that's what they did. That's what they understood fundamentally and exercised unequivocally.
Yeah.
So I take it nobody here voted for the EFF, huh?
I guess if I could have,
I hope not.
if I could just to close, because
That facial expression.
Katlego, you saying
I
something?
was saying just to
Yeah,
close.
go
Sorry,
ahead, go ahead.
I thought we were gonna go on about the EFF. Sorry, I was just saying just on my side. I guess closing comments would be like, just with everything in life, there's people who are having a real experience, and then there's people who are getting one up on another.
Just check your
person.
camera there, because you're blurry because you're not
Oh,
looking at your camera.
Sorry. Yeah, there's people who are having a real experience, and then there's people who are just trying to get one up on the next person. And that's just what I solely believe. There are transgender women who are actually having a real experience, and then there are transgender women who want an Olympic gold medal.
Homie chose the most controversial.
I mean, we're chatting about controversial shit already, So I'm just saying. There are mentally disturbed people who wander at night, and they're not thieves, and then there are thieves claiming to be mentally disturbed.
It's the story of the Baptists and the bootleggers.
That's it.
Have I told that before? You know the story of the Baptists and the bootleggers?
No.
There was a time in history where there was an advocacy for the banning of alcohol, right? By people of the Baptist church, specifically. The narrative was being pushed by the church. The observation was that alcohol was causing a lot of social ills that we can still measure till today. So they proposed that then there should be a banning of alcohol, right? And as they tried it in certain areas, I believe the prices of alcohol, just like in lockdown. Remember what it was like to buy alcohol in lockdown? Everything tripled in price, right? So once the bootleggers started taking wind of this, they started to realize that when you ban alcohol, it's not that people stop drinking alcohol, they just buy it for higher, more exorbitant prices. So the bootleggers jumped on the bandwagon and were advocating for the banning of alcohol with the Baptists, who had good intentions. But the bootleggers were just planning to sell the alcohol
at higher
in the
prices.
black market
Yeah.
at much higher
Smart.
prices
I
than
can't
the
even
list.
lie.
Yeah.
So it's the story of the Baptists and the bootleggers. A genuine cause can be co-opted by two different interest groups.
Yeah. Like you can just yeah, and that's it.
Sure, and I think a lot of the things that humans struggle with have been co-opted by Marxists and communists, especially the politicians, And I was planning in this podcast to show you guys pictures of Floyd Chivambu wearing a Karl Marx shirt or a Vladimir Lenin shirt to try show you what has shaped these politicians' mind and their story and how they conduct their politics. Part of the call of communism is for revolution and violent revolution. You see it in the way that these people behave. What ends up happening, we spoke about hierarchies being natural, and Jordan Peterson is the best person to go to for this type of information. Check out his critique on Marxism. Hierarchies are natural, and all the communists want to do is take the people below the pyramid and arbitrarily put them on top of the pyramid. Or of the hierarchy. And what you get is people who are less competent with more power. And they try to convince you that we can get rid of the hierarchy, that it can all be equal. But all they do is they take the less competent and put them on top of the hierarchy. And that's what ends up happening, because whether we like it or not, we need rules. We need enforcers of those rules if we're going to collaborate. And the smartest people have come up with the best solutions, like capitalism, like property rights. Right? That is the best solution. And we've been swayed to think differently, because all capitalism says is you have the right to own something. And how do we get to that conclusion? Well, the first thing that you own is your own body. Right? That's how we get to ownership. Only you have the ability to move your arm, and no one should be able to move your arm through force, right? And because there's a you, we can distinguish that, Fifi, you are you by the fact that only you control you, right? The fact that we can distinguish that if there's a you, there's a yours. There's something that belongs to you, right? And there's a long conversation to describe how that comes to be. And the capitalists just say, we need to protect you and yours as an individual, right? And not, and then that being the foundation for capitalism, I think that's the smartest way to go about organizing society and sharing resources, is by determining ownership by somebody's effort towards building something and recognizing individual property rights. Communism seeks to destroy property rights and put people who don't deserve on top. Capitalism has built the most amount of wealth that we've ever seen in this world. Again, the reason why I began the conversation on core beliefs in the beginning is because if you believe we come from a great place and now we are at a bad place because of capitalism, people can easily convince you that capitalism is an enemy. But if you recognize that we come from a terrible place, a poorer place, where we used to die of famine, disease, of being hunted and being violated, wars, property rights, more powerful people came over us, then you'll start to understand that we're in a better place now that we have mass production of defense weapons. Now that we can mass produce bricks and steel, we can all live in enclosures that protect us from the evil of bad people, so to speak. Now that we can all mass produce guns, now that we all have cars, means that when you're in trouble, cops can respond to you faster, and we can build a society where you're protected. That's all the wealth of capitalism. And we don't think long and hard enough about the absence of those things, what it used to be like.
I just want to ask a
Okay,
question.
there's 9 minutes, so
So-
we must get into
I
closing
know.
comments. I'm just saying.
I know. I want to ask a question. It's a very quick question, but actually, I'm
Yes,
lying.
sir.
It's not a very quick question because it's actually a very deep question that I don't think we'll be able to answer in 9 minutes. But I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, I think this brings me to the real foundational question that I think the book ultimately attempts to answer, that
Yes,
it
sir.
brings the reader to also try and answer themselves, which is there ever a way in which everyone can somewhat be included according to their merit?
Miles, with 9 minutes left.
I had a question. It wasn't that deep. Maybe we can think about his and answer mine.
Maybe we can all just end it off with questions. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Mine is, who or what does Benjamin represent? because he sees this play out from day one. He even sees when Squealer changes the last commandment to no alcohol to excess and goes, not my business. He already knows that that's what Squealer's been doing. So what is his role or place in the book? I don't quite understand or know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Any other
Good
questions? Yeah. Any other questions?
That's a brilliant question, actually.
Like
Uh,
he's
ah,
there.
I have
Um,
no. Oh, go ahead, Lizzie, please.
I have a comment. I think ultimately it all boils down to desire, or rather, yeah, desire. Let me use desire. For instance, gluttony, for example, the pig's selfishness and the pig's acts of gluttony allowed them to continuously exploit the animals, eat more, drink more milk, etc. So I think it all boils down to desire. The way that they decided, no, we're gonna be the better animals. So yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to say.
Any other questions, Mute?
No questions. So I'll make a comment regarding Fifi's question because I think it's dope. I see his role as being an objective look at the way humans have behaved in history and projecting that same behavior into the future. Yeah,
I agree.
Katlego.
That's interesting. I guys, I don't have any comments or questions. This was a great 3-hour session.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
I didn't expect that.
This has been great, and I think there's more.
Yeah.
Personally, that we can chat on.
There's so much
on
more.
this book. So
Yes.
I have a
personally.
question.
Oh yes, Masego, go for it.
I have a question. My question is, if Black people were to achieve what the so-called progressive political parties, progressive political forces are aiming, meaning if we got the land back, if we took over the economy, if we nationalized the banks, would we be in a better off or more prosperous state?
Nah, I can answer that shit right
With
now.
the, with the right
Probably
people
not.
in
How?
place.
I can answer that
You're
shit. Right
I
betraying the
say with the
revolution.
right people in place.
Yeah.
Ted,
Who
you
are those
betrayed
right
the
people, though?
revolution.
Who are those right people, though? Because I feel like the right people in place are the people who are leading the revolution to begin with. And
I see 4 of
those
them
are-
here.
Yeah. Also, we
Oh,
can't say
that's
we
crazy.
must
Nice.
have to get rid
Nice.
of
Cheers.
the all blacks. Eh?
I already see 4 of them here. 5, 6 of us already. Come on, guys. We just need the right people. I don't know how we'll find them, how we'll get them together, but what we've already proven that not all Black people don't know what to do. We
That's
have
right.
our successes.
Facts.
We have the 6 stories.
And-
they are there. We just again need the right people and not the incompetent ones, because that's who's there right now.
And if life has proven anything, ideas aren't unique. So that if we're thinking this, surely
there are other people thinking this too. I think to answer, I think it was Lizzie's question. Yeah, I think it was Lizzie's question, which was about Benjamin.
it was Fifi's.
Fifi, sorry, it was Fifi's question. Sorry, it was Fifi's question. About Benjamin.
4 minutes.
I think what he represents ultimately is it's a double click on what Mute said, but just the reason he was so pessimistic and indifferent to what was happening was because he's lived long enough to understand that seasons come and seasons go, but at the end of the day, human nature never changes. There's always going to be somebody who wants to be at the top, and there's always going to be somebody who does that at the expense of the people who he leads. So
Crazy.
that's why I just kept quiet.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
Oh,
that is the
Dope,
cloosing
dope,
of
dope.
another podcasting session. This was great. It's nice to have
It was.
all these lovely faces in the room. I guess there's not much left to be said, guys. That's Animal Farm. Thank you, George.
And that was
wow, aka George
Shout
Orwell.
out to Napoleon, my boy Napoleon.
Shout out to my boy.
You're on
Wow.
Napoleon's side.
Did you dirty throw ball? R.I.P. Boxer. R.I.P. Boxer. R.I.P. Boxer. That's my realest nigga in
Napoleon
the game. Homie
gang.
said, I will work harder.
No, Mute, no.
I said Napoleon gang.